At Parker, our purpose is simple. We want to make the world a better place by working more efficiently, by using more sustainable practices, by developing better technologies. We keep moving forward. With each new idea, innovation, and partnership, we're one step closer to fulfilling our purpose every single day. To find out more, visit parker.com/purpose. Parker, engineering your success.
But I don't need to see everything about my body as beautiful for it to be worthy and for it to serve me well. Beauty is just one component of existence. It's only one descriptor. And I feel like what my body does for me is about more than beauty. I don't know. And I'm not saying that people with PCOS aren't beautiful, because come on, we know. I know how it is. I know the PCOS folks. We have some great and amazing, strong, beautiful people. But I also don't think that you have to feel beautiful to love who you are.
Hey, Love Food listener, Julie Duffy Dillon here. I'm preparing season 4 of the Love Food podcast. And in the meantime, I'm rebroadcasting the PCOS and Food Peace podcast. Kimmie Singh and I interviewed people navigating their food peace journey while affected by a chronic condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome. Do you not experience this, yet experience diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, or another condition and don't want to diet? Or are you feeling shame every time you leave the doctor's office or avoid them altogether because of the weight talk? Or are you looking for more body-liberating resources? Well, then we made this podcast just for you. Pencil me in for Tuesday, September 17th, when season 4 of a Love Food podcast begins. And now, the PCOS and Food Peace podcast. Take care.
Chapter 10, Kimmie Singh on worthiness and chronic conditions.
Hi, and welcome to the PCOS and Food Peace podcast. I am Julie Duffy Dillon.
And I am Kimmie Singh. We're so glad that you're here with us. We put together this show with you in mind, and we hope that it delivers the companionship that you're looking for as you navigate your PCOS journey.
So Kimmie and I have worked hard to put this show together to shine a light on voices often not heard in PCOS circles. You will hear from people like Jess Baker, Ivy Felicia, Danny, Adriana, Sophie Carter-Kahn, and many others. Every interviewee was asked a series of questions about their PCOS journey. We saved the best for last. This episode features Kimmie Singh. Kimmie has a master's degree in nutrition, also, note, an undergrad in physics. She's a dietetic intern, which if you're not in nutrition, you may not know what that means. It basically means she's a dietitian in training. She's almost done. But before we get to the interview with Kimmie, which I'm so excited about, Kimmie, we will start how we start every chapter of the PCOS and Food Peace podcast with a listener question. We gather these questions on Instagram, through our Facebook community, or email newsletter.
This question comes from our PCOS and Food Peace Facebook community. This is a free non-diet group that brings together people with PCOS who are not looking for another diet.
Yes, there are way too many of those. And if you're not interesting, you probably are very interesting. But if you're interested in joining our PCOS and Food Peace support community, you can find us on Facebook, and I will put a link to it in the show notes.
Yes. And so the community asked us this question. I'd love to know more about the lesser known aspects of PCOS, mood disorders, hyperhidrosis, sleep problems, etc. I find that I have a lot of issues like this, and I've always wondered if they do relate to my PCOS.
Oh, I love this question. And do you know why? I feel like everyone thinks of PCOS because, ovaries is in the name, that it's just about ovaries. And it's about so much else. Like, it's so many other things, and that all those things compound on top of each other. Because of course, PCOS is about infertility, which is the number one cause of infertility, which I feel like for so many people then leads to relationship stuff. It leads to depression and just a really hard time coping with life decisions and outcomes. It just makes life hard. But PCOS is also linked to sleep disorders. And I know 75% of people with PCOS have a sleep disorder. So it's happening to a lot of people. But there's also this hyperhidrosis, which is lots of sweating, right? Isn't that what it is, Kimmie? Hyperhidrosis?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay. I asked that because I'm like, wait, am I remembering this right? But because I get hyperhidrosis and the HS, which, oh my goodness, I know we talked about in chapter 2 with Sophie Carter-Kahn. We talked about HS, oh gosh, I can't pronounce it, but it's the one with like the boils and the skin condition that a lot of people with PCOS have. But there's so many other things that happen. And of course, this person mentioned sleep disorders, or not sleep disorders, she does mention that, but she also mentions mood disorders. And I feel like that's such a big part of the discussion in our Facebook community is like the mood disorders as they relate to PCOS.
Yeah, it's been really interesting for me to watch the conversations unfold in the Facebook group because, I think a lot of us don't realize that we have this common denominator. And so watching people say, oh, yeah, I felt like I lashed out on people today, or I was feeling super angry. And so many people come in saying, I have that exact same experience almost every day. And it's affecting my relationships, it's affecting my day to day. So I think that's one thing that is not well known, just how many commonalities there are between like moods and PCOS.
Mm-hmm. What is that like to connect with other people and know that they're going through something similar?
Yeah,
what is that like?
It's really grounding for so many reasons. And it's been helpful like in my own day-to-day life, like when I can kind of feel like a mood thing coming up, I'm like, oh wait, this is maybe PCOS related. Like, let me just backtrack and see. And let me reassess the situation. And it helps me like with my mindfulness. And it makes me kind of feel more in control of it because I know what's going on. I feel like it's not just happening to me, it's happening with me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I never thought about it from that point of view. And that's a really, I feel like the thing that's really neat about that is it's easier then to step back from the intensity of the experience when you can name it and identify where it's coming from. And to not personalize it as much as like, I'm doing it wrong, or not blaming.
Exactly.
Wow. That's really, I could see how that would be really helpful in just the PCOS journey. And, something that I've seen just sitting with people as they experience their mood disorder along with PCOS. And when I say mood disorder, that can mean depression, that can mean anxiety, it can mean ADD, ADHD, it can be bipolar disorder, it can be so many different types of mood disorders. What I've noticed is that these mood disorders, they have a different kind of vibe than people without PCOS. And I'm saying this purely from a clinician point of view. This is not like research-based, but like just 20 years of sitting with people who experience PCOS, which I feel like has some clout, but it's not the same. It's not like evidence, but it's practice-based evidence. And there's a difference that I think as clinicians, we need to be really aware of because, someone with anxiety, we can give some really generalized kind of recommendations that work for most people. But with PCOS, namely with anxiety, that's one of the mood disorders that I see to just be so debilitating for my clients. And I just want to name that. Like if you're someone who experiences a mood disorder like anxiety with PCOS and you're wondering like, why can't I get my shit together? But so and so with anxiety without PCOS is able to get their shit together. Well, it may be because of the PCOS is the root of the mood disorder. And some people are like, well, why are mood disorders such a big part of PCOS? And something that we know to be true is that PCOS and its genetic connections, it starts in the hypothalamus. And so mood also originates in the hypothalamus. So it just makes sense that happens. And oftentimes the mood disorder is the first type of symptom people even have before they're even diagnosed with PCOS. So, I could talk about this part all day, but we need to get to your interview, Kimmie, and I'm really excited to get to it. But we're going to pause first for a brief commercial break.
At Parker, our purpose is simple. We want to make the world a better place by working more efficiently, by using more sustainable practices, by developing better technologies. We keep moving forward. With each new idea, innovation, and partnership, we're one step closer to fulfilling our purpose every single day. To find out more, Visit parker.com/purpose. Parker, engineering your success.
This rebroadcast of the PCOS and Food Peace podcast is brought to you by my PCOS and Food Peace courses. If you're experiencing PCOS, I know at some point you were told you have to diet in order to promote health, like forever. So what do you do when you've tried every diet and it hasn't worked? What do you do if you know diets don't work for most people? So why would they work when you have PCOS? I have a course just for you. I have a 12-step system that I take people through who are wanting to move away from diets, heal their relationship with food, do intuitive eating work, and promote health at the same time. Yeah, it's possible. If you want to look at all the details, go to PCOSandFoodPeace.com. And keep in mind that I have a 25% off coupon that when you're in the checkout area, just put in the coupon code podcast and you'll get 25% off. So I look forward to seeing you within the course. And if you're a dietitian who helps people with PCOS, which so many people are affected by this condition. So I have a feeling if you're a dietitian, you are working with people with PCOS. And if you're a dietitian who is HAES informed or uses only non-diet approaches, if you don't, well, look into them because they're a really important part of the PCOS healing experience. And if you want some more tools to help those clients with PCOS, go to the course I designed just for you. It has 20 continuing education units through CDR, and you can get to all the details at PCOSandFoodPeace.com/dietitians. This rebroadcast is also brought to you by Kimmie Singh's work at tastingabundance.com. So Kimmie Singh, when she recorded this podcast with me, was finishing up her master's degree in nutrition and starting her dietetic internship. And she is all done. She is a dietitian now and seeing clients. If you would like to know more about her work, she does speaking nationally and she also works with clients individually. If you'd like to know more about her work, go to tastingabundance.com. All right, enough of all that. Let's get back to the show. Kimmie and I are thrilled to share our interview with Jess Baker. She's a positive, progressive, and magnificently irreverent force to be reckoned with in the realm of self-love, advocacy, and mental health. She believes in the importance of body autonomy, hard conversations, strong coffee, and even stronger language. She does all of these in our interview, and we loved it. After creating satirical versions of Abercrombie & Fitch advertisements in 2013, she appeared on The Today Show and quickly became one of the leading voices in the current body image movement. That's why it was so important to include Jess Baker in the PCOS and Food Peace podcast. When not writing, Jess spends her time speaking around the world, working with plus-size clothing companies, organizing body liberation events, taking pictures in her underwear, and attempting to convince her cats that they liked to wear bow ties. Learn more about Jess at themilitantbaker.com. The interview with Jess is coming up next, following this brief commercial break. This PCOS and Food Peace podcast is being brought to you by Theralogics, the makers of Ovasitol, an inositol supplement with a blend of myo-inositol and D-chiro-inositol in the body's optimal ratio of 40:1. Inositols are nutrients that help to decrease insulin resistance, promote menstrual regularity, restore ovulation, and balance hormone levels. In convenient powder form, Ovasitol can be enjoyed in your favorite beverage or smoothie. Available in both a canister and convenient single-serving packets, Ovasitol contains 100% pure inositols with no additives. It also is the only inositol supplement that I recommend to my clients with PCOS because it does have that very important 40:1 ratio and is third-party tested. Order online today at Theralogics.com. That's Theralogix.com. And during checkout, be sure to use my PRC code 127410, and you will get an exclusive PCOS and Food Peace podcast discount. Also, be sure to listen to the end of this episode where we will give you the opportunity to win a free 90-day supplies of Ovasitol. So go to Theralogix.com and use the PRC code 127410. Hey, Kimmie.
Hey, Julie.
Tell me how you figured out you have PCOS.
So I was about 19 years old and I went to the gynecologist for my first annual checkup. And at the end of my checkup, my gynecologist said, "Hey, by the way, I think you have PCOS. You may have trouble conceiving. Here's a pamphlet." No, sorry. She asked her nurse to give me a pamphlet and then she left the room.
So she dropped this big bomb.
Mhm.
And this is your first time ever going to the lady doctor.
Yes.
Oh geez. I wonder, have you found that to be unusual for because I'm surprised the first time going to one, finding
Mhm.
out. I feel like so many people end up having to go to all these doctors and everything and
Uh,
you just weren't even, were you expecting that?
No, I didn't know what PCOS was. I haven't heard about it. But I kind of thought something was up because I've always had irregular periods. And so when she told me this, I was just completely shocked. I knew nothing about it. So,
Wow.
yeah, but I haven't heard of anybody else that had it told to them on the first time they went to the
Mhm.
lady doctor.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, how did she know that you had it?
Well, I told her some of my symptoms, like particularly the acne and then the irregular periods. So she's like, "I think you might have PCOS," and then they gave the pamphlet, and then she took some blood work, and then somebody from the office gave me a call and
Mhm.
said, "Yeah, it's confirmed you have it." But that's the only information I received from them, and this was how long ago was this? Almost 10 years ago. So this was before Google had a lot of information. So I was able to find some, but just enough to catastrophize it all. So how
Yeah.
helpful, right?
Right. Well, you know what I always say, PCOS is not a pamphlet disease.
Yes.
That's like strep throat or pink eye gets a pamphlet, not PCOS, you know? I think it's
Yeah.
there's no way that they could give you enough information.
Yeah.
And then at 19 to hear "Oh yeah, you may not be able to have children someday."
Yes.
Whether you're thinking about that at 19 yet or not, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So I want to ask you another question.
Mhm.
How has your relationship with healthcare professionals been in relation to your PCOS treatment?
So since then, after my first diagnosis, it definitely wasn't great. Like there was a lot of weight stigma. There was very little explanation. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a very curious person. So I would come to the doctor with these questions and the doctors weren't able to answer them or they would give a very vague explanation. And when I would ask more questions, they would get very impatient. And so then as I've had weight changes, I noticed more weight stigma in healthcare settings. So there was some healthcare avoidance on my end. And it just felt like there was a really rocky relationship with my healthcare providers. And
Mhm.
yeah, and this all actually changed surprisingly because I found an office here in North Carolina where they are great, and I can't speak highly enough of them. If you are local to the state, they are. It is called Mosaic Comprehensive Care in Chapel Hill. And so this has been a really different experience for me just because I feel like they treat me as a whole human, not just a patient running through the door. And so before that, it's just been really negative experiences.
Well, you mentioned weight stigma, and what was like one thing about the work that you do is you're able to name it. And what was the way that you knew that it was the weight stigma that you were experiencing?
There are so many different examples. I would say I've had physicians not believe me when I told them what I was eating or how often I was exercising. They wouldn't ask many questions and they would prescribe weight loss drugs.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
yeah.
I find that when I talk to someone with PCOS, that experience of not being believed is universal, which is makes me want to throw up. It's horrible, that is
Yeah.
the typical normal expected experience to either have undiagnosed PCOS and bring this information to the doctor, or to have PCOS and just not be believed. And I feel like that is something, someone listening who's maybe in that place or just experiences PCOS can totally relate to. Just like, and I think it's really helpful how you name it. Like that's weight stigma. Like there's something about
Yeah.
putting the name on that experience that I feel like as a feminist approach has taught me to do. Naming it
Yeah.
puts the energy where it needs to go instead of like on you and your body and the PCOS. It more is on this oppression, and
Yeah, exactly. And
mhm.
like to any healthcare professionals listening, I mean, there's a ton of research on weight stigma and how it's harmful. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Hopefully it stops sooner, sooner than we
Yeah.
expect it to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I know for me, listening to, as a dietitian, listening to what people were telling me before I really started to specialize in PCOS, the first probably half dozen people who either had PCOS or weren't sure if they had it, and they would tell me how little they were eating and how much they were exercising. There was a part of my training that leaned on, oh, you're only supposed to believe that a person's eating a third of what, or that not a third. They're eating 3 times more than what they're telling you. For some reason, I've held on to that amount. But,
Hmm.
after so many people say the same thing over and over again, like there's something to it, and I encourage anybody that works in healthcare to keep that in mind, that they're telling the truth. Like that's totally the PCOS experience. And I
Yeah.
wish we could change that somehow.
Yeah, exactly. And I
Yeah.
think it also turns it around to the patient where
Mhm.
they're second guessing themselves. They already maybe don't have a great relationship with their body and
Mhm.
they're just trusting themselves less when they see this happening to them.
Yeah, yeah. I know a number of people who've been going to Mosaic, and the difference is mind-blowing. And honestly, it's the type of experience that people are describing is what people who are experiencing thin privilege get all the time at the doctor, where they're just like listened to and then
Yeah.
given options to help any ailment, you know?
Yeah. Who would have thought that would happen at the doctor's office?
Right.
Yeah,
And like it's dignity. That is thing. I'm like, it's dignified healthcare. Who knew?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. The thing that I love about Mosaic comprehensive care is that they don't take a weight. She's like, oh, it's just not a vital sign, and she being the doctor who runs the clinic, Dr. Metz. And I think that just starts it out even so great,
Yes, it does. It really changes things from when you enter the office until you leave. And I would say even as a patient, I felt more listened to and I felt more involved in the decisions around my health.
Hmm. Well, you mentioned before you found someone who was working to avoid weight stigma, but when you were seeing other healthcare providers, the avoidance of healthcare,
Mhm.
and that's one of the things I think is so dangerous about weight stigma with PCOS. And tell me about your experience with that. Like, just like what made you not want to go to the doctor?
Oh my gosh. Well, I had one that would just yell and she would she would yell so often and I would make her these appointments, these follow-up appointments, and I didn't want to go and I felt like it got to a certain point where I was like, okay, this just isn't serving me at all. It wasn't,
Mm,
I should have realized it earlier, but I think it's a really common theme among people with PCOS, especially among fat people with PCOS.
hmm. Yeah. Well, and I hear this all the time too. I'm like, so many docs don't really know what they're doing with PCOS and dietitians. So, like,
Hmm.
so many of my clients with PCOS know so much more than me. And,
Yeah.
I think that's just what the crummy part of it too is. It's just healthcare providers
Yeah,
just aren't keeping up to date on it.
exactly.
Well, I want to pivot a little bit and go back to when you were diagnosed with
Hmm.
PCOS. How did you tell your family and your loved ones about this diagnosis?
Yeah, so I took my time and I told them when I felt ready. And I also kept in mind that it was up to me to decide what I wanted to tell them and how I wanted to tell them. And so I think sometimes we can feel like there's pressure to be really transparent and tell everybody everything. But for me, it really felt like a case by case basis. And even now, since then, I share it as it comes up. I don't hide it from people intentionally, but I also feel like there are components of my PCOS that I don't need to tell everybody if I don't feel like they're a good supporter of my experience with my body.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I think there's a difference between, keeping things private and keeping it secret.
Mm-hmm.
and what you're describing, it sounds like to me, tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like it's just private at times. You get to decide who you choose.
Yeah.
And, at the secret side is like, to me is like a shameful kind of connection. And,
Yeah.
especially it's because it's about ovaries and,
Mm-hmm.
menstruating and
Yeah.
things that people often aren't talking about. I can see how for a lot of people, it's just feels weird to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever get a reaction from someone that surprised you when you told them that you had this?
Oh gosh, so the reactions are usually like one of two. For sometimes people just don't know what it is
Yeah.
and they feel uncomfortable. They just don't ask about it. And sometimes you can see they're just kind of going along with the conversation. And I understand that as someone who loves to talk, but then there are sometimes people know a little bit about PCOS and they want to throw all this information about it to you, about something you have. And so those are usually the two reactions I get.
Mm. What do you like? What would you want people to do? Like, what would you prefer to be the reaction?
Maybe listen. I would
Mm-hmm.
say listen a little bit before you share stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
would say, if you don't have PCOS and you don't know much about it, you don't have to give me advice.
Mm.
Thanks, anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, like you'll ask if
Yeah.
you want to. Yeah. Um, so how has the PCOS experience affected your relationship with food?
Yeah. So before I knew I had PCOS, I would say it still affected my relationship with food just from changes in my weight and not feeling great in my body. So there was lots of dieting. And then after my diagnosis, as I read a little bit about it, I thought, okay, carbs are the enemy, especially refined carbohydrates. So I just have to avoid them like the plague. And as we know, diets don't work. So that didn't really work out. But overall, I just felt like I had to ignore how I felt
Mm.
and follow diets because that's the only way to treat my PCOS. And it really caused this harmful relationship with food where every single thing I ate felt like it had this power to either help me or destroy me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Evelyn Tribole, one of the co-authors of Intuitive Eating, she always says like we live in this world that people think food either kills us or cures us. Is
Hmm.
that kind of the place you were in? Of
Yeah,
like every
definitely.
bite, holy crap, that's like way too much power for every bite of food. Um,
Exactly.
wow. Yeah, and of course diets don't work, but yet it's the primary recommendation or first line of treatment for PCOS. And um whenever I read that anywhere, I'm like, well, what is this sustainable weight management you talk about? Like what is
Yeah,
this? It's like this shiny unicorn that doesn't actually exist for most people.
exactly.
Well, I would appreciate that kind of relationship with food would affect your relationship with your body. And so tell me about how the PCOS experience has affected your relationship with your body.
Oh gosh, there have been a lot of different phases. And so anybody that's listening, I would say that how it feels now isn't necessarily going to be how it feels in 5 or 10 years from now. And so there were lots of times that I felt disappointment. Then there were times that I learned more about body positivity and it felt great. But I've also come to a place, and this isn't my idea. I've heard this from a lot of other people, but I don't need to see everything about my body as beautiful for it to be worthy and for it to serve me well. I really feel like beauty is just one component of existence, it's only one descriptor. And I feel like what my body does for me is about more than beauty. I don't know. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying that people with PCOS aren't beautiful, because come on, we know. I know how it is. I know the PCOS folks. We have some great and amazing, strong, beautiful people. But I also don't think that you have to feel beautiful to love who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember you wrote a blog post in that PCOS blog series you did, which is outstanding. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. You mentioned the word worthy in one of them, and I don't know if you can remember which one. I'm totally putting you on the spot, but like that resonated with so many people. Like so many
Yes, I
people.
do.
Yeah, which one was it? Do you remember?
Oh gosh. Oh wait, no, let me think. No, I don't remember the
We'll put
blog
it.
post,
We'll put it in the
but
show notes. Yeah.
yeah, we'll figure it out. But
Yeah.
I do remember I said that just because your body is different doesn't mean it's less worthy.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important to keep in mind.
Yeah, there's so many people who were in obvious tears over their keyboard. Just was like it connected so
Mm.
it just connected it in a way that filled a person in a way they needed to be filled. Like their soul needed that information so deeply. Yeah, and what is it about the PCOS experience that makes people feel like it makes their body then not worthy? You know, is that something
Yeah.
you've connected with, or like I don't know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's a lot. I mean, I think that feeling different, feeling like you look different is one component. Also, I think of just the like menstrual irregularities. Oh gosh, like it feeling like your body is not doing this thing that everybody else is doing. And then going on to fertility, there's so much stigma around that and this expectation that you have to be able to physically carry a child. There are so many things on its own. And then when you add in what healthcare providers tell people, what family members or friends may tell people, it just adds on more and more doubt to how worthy you are.
Mm-hmm. I can remember people have told me that experience PCOS that it makes them if they're identifying as a female, like it makes them feel like less female, and that
Mhm.
led to some of that experience. And I feel like so much of the PCOS conversation is on fertility, which I know
Yeah.
it's important, but it's also sucks too because that's
Mhm.
not the whole part of it. But
Yeah.
but it is the number one cause of infertility, but
Mhm.
that feeling of worth, I wish there was a way for that just to be more a part of the conversation that,
Yeah.
experiencing and experiencing this condition and that doesn't take away your worth, your
Mhm.
body still has that worth. So, um,
Exactly.
I think this is a really good segue to like body positivity, or what you and I often say instead is like fat positivity.
Yes.
How do you perceive PCOS within body positivity or fat positivity?
Yeah, so for PCOS and other chronic conditions, I think it's really important to acknowledge all the emotions that come along with having a chronic condition. I think that it would be great if we all felt happy and positive about our bodies all the time. But like I said before, like it's okay to feel like it's not what you want to happen. It's okay to feel sad and disappointed and to grieve what you wish would have happened. And so I think that making space for those negative, I guess, if you want to call them negative emotions, will help you feel more embodied.
Hmm. And so, if there's more of an embodiment, what do you see like that? How is that important then, from your point of view?
Oh gosh, I think that it's important for connection to other people, sincere connection. Then I also feel like it's important just for overall wellness. I mean, I want to say health, but I don't want to, health isn't everything, but I think it could improve your quality of life by just connection with others, connecting with how you experience food and movement, so many components of life.
Hmm. And uh, as a dietitian in training, like you are, and myself as a dietitian, we certainly, I think something that we agree on is like health is not a moral
Yeah,
issue. A health is just health, and it doesn't mean a person's worth is more if they're
exactly.
healthier. And as dietitians, it's kind of part of the arena that we're talking about, and something that
Mhm.
I connect to is that embodiment when a person is in a place where they feel connected to their body. I feel like it's closer to that worth then too,
Mhm.
and not always, maybe it's not always there or it's always accessible because of what's going on or because of oppressive
Mhm.
systems, but yet just that embodiment is such a like almost like a super highway to connect to things like worth and access to dignified healthcare and things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that that embodiment really recognizes, well, it really kind of brings you to ask yourself, do you feel worthy in this moment? Do you feel worthy right now as you're listening to this podcast? And so I think when you're feeling embodied, the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Whether those uncomfortable emotions are there,
Yeah.
whether there's systemic oppression there, there's still that
Hmm.
internal belief of worth. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So, what do you wish other dietitians or therapists or medical providers, what do you wish they knew about PCOS?
Gosh, I could go on for days. So
We
I'll
got
stare
time.
at that. Okay, the first thing is that you need to know there are different types of PCOS. Maybe Julie can plug in the notes post I wrote about this. So PCOS affects people differently. Aside from the 4 categories of PCOS, there's still lots of individual differences. So what works for one person shouldn't be advised for every person blindly. And I would also add that you have to consider how PCOS affects mental health. And there is some research on this. And I know that it seems like some doctors are not comfortable discussing mental health with patients, but by neglecting to recognize this, you're harming the PCOS community.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about even therapists? Because I feel like I wish therapists knew more about PCOS. And I get really excited when I talk to a therapist who has PCOS because I feel like, oh, they're going to get it. You know, how it's important to talk about or just be aware of what's going on with their PCOS experience. You know, what do you wish mental health providers knew about it?
Yeah, well, I would want them to know the increased risk of developing eating disorders. I would also want them to know that PCOS affects moods. And I know, like, I've been learning about this more recently, is like the increased risk of having ADHD if you have PCOS. And even those who don't necessarily have all of the classic ADHD symptoms may have some of them that are affecting their lives.
Yeah. I mean, whatever can affect the hypothalamus can be happening with PCOS, right? So it may not be like the typical ADD, but there may be some parts of it that are being experienced. Yeah. One of the things that I've picked up along the way is that that a mood disorder of some sort, which sometimes can be like ADD, is oftentimes the very first symptom a person has before they even go through puberty when they have PCOS. I wish mental health providers kind of understood how the origins of PCOS affects mood and then how the world treats a body that's experiencing PCOS can also lead to like the body image stuff and the eating disorders and the worth, like we were talking about earlier. So, it sounds like we have a long list for them.
Yes. The list is ongoing for now.
Yes. So I'll definitely put a link in the show notes to the different types of PCOS that you're talking about. That's one of our most popular ones that you've written. So I'll put a link to that. So what was the best and worst PCOS advice you've ever gotten?
Oh gosh. Okay. So the worst, was definitely that I should be gluten-free, have a gluten-free diet. Oh my gosh. And gluten is it really is so good. And I want to say that, I feel like there's something about gluten that people think they're becoming a martyr when they kick it out of their diet voluntarily. And learning that a lot of the gluten-free foods were not really supportive to my PCOS, I would kind of recognize how I felt a few hours after eating them. And I would have these energy crashes. And it was almost hard for me to believe because I was like, no, but this is gluten-free. This has to be good. And so there was this layer of denial. Yeah. So that was the worst. The best was actually from Julie, and she encouraged that I observe how I feel after having different levels of fat or different amounts of fat in my dairy products. And I was really surprised to notice that when I would have dairy with higher fat content, I would feel more satisfied longer and I would feel almost like more energized longer. So, and like, that's another thing. It goes against diet culture. So you have to be able to listen to your body a little bit after eating to kind of learn what diet culture taught you doesn't necessarily work. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the, the call out there. Thank you. But also, it's interesting because like the higher fat dairy product, was that part of why the gluten-free stuff was not helpful to you? Did it not have enough fat in it, maybe? If that's just something that for your body that feels good?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about it in great detail, but I'm also wondering just the protein because gluten is a protein. But good point. I don't know.
Good point.
And it's not, I'm not sure though, exactly.
Yeah. And I wish we knew more about PCOS. Like you said, I wish everyone knew that it comes down to such an individual experience. And I feel like the best information the body's going to tell you,
Exactly.
So I'm excited that that kind of embodiment gave you that kind of feedback. So you just knew from now on, that's just what felt best. So not that one was bad or better, worse, whatever, just one felt better to you. So yeah. So what tools are you using these days to navigate your mental and physical wellness with PCOS?
Yeah, so support from friends, from fat positive friends, from my mentors, all of that's been very helpful for just kind of learning more about myself and how I can fit in this world as a fat person with PCOS. I've also found gentleness with myself and compassion to be really, really crucial to kind of combat a lot of the negative experiences around PCOS. So there are times that I feel really disappointed with diet culture and I feel really angry. And there are times where I feel like I need to release that anger. But then I also feel like I need to intentionally create space for having like very calming time during the day for candles, maybe like some reading, just sort of some things to kind of bring me down, if that makes sense. I don't mean like down as in like sad, but like bring me down from feeling disappointed.
Yeah. And I think about it like physiologically, like bringing it down so your cortisol comes down or something. Yeah. Cause like that, just having chaos all the time, that's something that's going to affect PCOS in a harder way. Yeah. So, cool. Well, what have you learned about PCOS that surprised you?
Okay, so I don't know if the listeners already know this, but when I found this out, I was shook, so to speak. So, PCOS is likely to cause dry eyes. And when I found this out, I could not believe it because I've always had dry eyes and I just couldn't believe it. I remember reading this twice. I was like, no, what's going on? Are you serious? And so it just explains so much for me. So I actually recently spoke to my eye doctor about this and he was like, well, you do wear the Cadillac of contact lenses. And I was like, wait, what? And he said that, a lot of times when people have PCOS, like they need to wear contact lenses that best support their dry eyes. And so like this whole time I've had these contact lenses that are healthier to, I guess, for dry eyes. I'm not sure if this is making sense.
It does. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Because part of the whole dry eye thing, when I started reading about it, I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Not another body part that's affected by this. Did you find your eye doctor to be knowledgeable about PCOS?
No, I'm not. It was one of those situations where I'm not sure if he was just going along or not, but he was really nice.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Well, give him that.
Yeah. And he was really funny. So that's always good.
That is good. So go back to that, what was it? 19-year-old Kimmie getting the diagnosis, the pamphlet thrown at you and that bomb of like, oh yeah, so you may not be able to have kids. What would you want to tell yourself to that 19-year-old Kimmie? What would you like to tell her?
So the first thing is that it's okay to listen to your body. I would also want to educate that 19-year-old that PCOS affects more than your fertility. So it's important to pay attention to, but not in a way that's scary or threatening, but just in a way that it's important to be curious, to trust and learn more about yourself.
Yes. If only like that connection stayed forever for everyone, that like, it's okay to listen to your body. You can still trust it. Oh, well, thank you so much. Any other information that you were wanting to talk about with PCOS, or do you feel like, did you check all your boxes?
I think I checked my boxes.
Good. Well, thank you so much for your time and telling us about your lived experience.
No problem. Thank you, Julie.
Kimmie, I am so glad that we were able to have this chat. It was so wonderful to hear about your lived experience. And thank you so much for sharing it with the listener. And if a listener is wanting to know more about your work, especially if they're listening to this and it's like a year from now and you're a dietitian and they want to find out how they can get to know your work, where's a place for people to find that?
Yeah, they can check out my blog at tastingabundance.com, and they can also find me on Instagram. My handle is tastingabundance.
Awesome. And, this is kind of a bittersweet experience right now that I'm connecting to at the moment, Kimmie, because your interview, your chat was the last chapter of our PCOS and Food Peace series. Ooh. I'm
So
feeling sad.
sad.
I know. This has been such a fun project to work on with you. And as we close this chapter and end the series, I'm also connecting to part of why we wanted to do this project was because we wanted to shine the light on voices that a lot of people don't hear from when they talk about PCOS. And we didn't shine a light on all the people we wanted to shine a light on. I mean, we have to just own it. But what are your initial thoughts? Like who could we included to make this a more inclusive series?
Yeah, I feel like there are so many groups. I mean, I hope I don't leave anyone out, but like maybe people from the trans community, people who consider like non-binary gendered, and also I would love to hear about somebody who's much older that has PCOS.
Yes, for sure.
And also, I think like various nationalities. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Julie?
I was thinking the same thing. Like, I feel like people from different countries, people who have bodies who are disabled and, they're struggling with that part of their PCOS experience, or that's just their lived experience. I think that would have added another voice that's often missed. I don't know. Like, as time goes on, maybe we can do another series. I mean, I think it's something to consider and we can include those voices. So if you identify with a lived experience that's different than Kimmie and I got a chance to shine a light on, let us know. Like, we would love to connect with you. And, as we think about what's next for this PCOS and Food Peace podcast, because this is the last chapter, but who knows? Maybe there's another book, so maybe we can do more with it. But we definitely want to continue the work of helping more voices to come through. And, one of the things that I know that I'm working really hard on is when I first started working with people with PCOS, I would always say women with PCOS. I always said females and things like that. And that's something that I know Kimmie and I, we've talked a lot about, like, what's a more inclusive way. And so we've decided that people with PCOS, just including people who don't identify as female, is something that we find to be, we really want, that's important to us. And because different voices need to also have access to healing and hope and non-diet ways of treating PCOS, and they shouldn't be excluded. So yeah, that maybe that's just something to think about. But again, if you are someone that has a different lived experience, we would love to connect with you. And if you would like to stay connected to the podcast and just the work that we're doing, make sure to follow Kimmie on Instagram at Tasting Abundance, and I'm at Food Peace Dietitian. And also just go to PCOSandFoodPeace.com/podcast, and you'll stay in the loop. But until next time, we're signing off. Take care, friends.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this rebroadcast of the PCOS and Food Peace podcast. It was created by Julie Duffy Dillon and Kimmie Singh. Audio engineer is Toby Lyles from 24 Sound. Show art by Katie Sanders from Pop and Gray. Music by Tiny Music and titled Super Pop. We are grateful that you listened to our show, and if you'd like more information about Julie's work, go to juliedillonrd.com, and Kimmie's work, go to tastingabundance.com. Thank you for listening to the show, and we hope it gave you more opportunities to experience food peace.